I had a album really of rap songs, and one of the beats that I was supposed to write a rap to, I couldn't figure out what to say, and so I decided to sing a cover of Sam Cooke's "Change Is Gonna Come."
Hmm.
And literally, the words are true, right? An entire change came, and it also became sort of the model for my career. That was Sam Cooke's one protest song or movement song or activism song about the civil rights movement. And it ultimately foreshadows my career making music for positive social transformation, using my songs to try to be effective in whatever social movement or emotional and psychological phase we are in the world. When I was on a major recording label, there was a time where I felt a huge imbalance and I knew I needed to leave the label.
Hmm.
And so it was a very stressful time. And I don't ever really feel or process or acknowledge stress. So in that moment when I was actually feeling it and processing it, I knew there was something very wrong. And in order to get to the other side of that, I had to do something extremely risky, or at least what felt like a risk, which was to leave the recording contract and go out on my own.
Hmm.
But I didn't feel good where I was. So the only way to feel better, in my opinion at the time, was to make that transformation. And it worked, and so now in a peaceful place. And now I'm in a place where there is some tension and a little bit of anxiety around a new venture that I'm engaging, but that's because I'm learning, and it's a different kind of stress. It's not a bad stress. It's like a really positive stress. It's exciting.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Boom Vision. We've got a real special treat in this episode. Today's guest is Egbert Nathaniel Dawkins III. If that name doesn't ring a bell, you may know him as his stage name, Aloe Blacc. Grammy-nominated recording artist, singer, and songwriter. How did a son of an immigrant family from Panama transform his career from a corporate consultant to becoming a world-renowned hip-hop artist, singer-songwriter, and philanthropist? With such a soulful voice and energy, what does it mean when he describes his music as AIM? A-I-M. From different pivots in his life that shaped his path in music, how does Aloe Blacc create a strong foundation of mind, body, and soul to amplify his voice and positive impact? You'll definitely want to tune in to this interview. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Ye. This show is about how you can thrive. It's when you build success in alignment with your mind, body, and soul. I created this podcast to give you perspectives and frameworks on how to strengthen your mindset and gain clarity in your purpose. It's time for you to live an extraordinary life with vision that you design. Let's get to work. Music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything. This quote was by Plato. Folks, welcome to episode 28 of the Boom Vision Podcast. I am excited to share today's interview with none other than Aloe Blacc. From a hip-hop artist turned singer-songwriter, this Grammy-nominated recording artist is a husband, father, and philanthropist who uses his platform of music to create meaningful social change. As a brief background, in the years since Aloe Blacc's last album, Lift Your Spirit, the global superstar spent his time working on an even dearer project, his family. All Love Everything. His latest album is the singer-songwriter's first collection of material written as a father, a journey that expanded Blacc's already heartfelt artistic palette. Aloe has said, quote, "Becoming a father has made me want to share those experiences in music," end quote. Admitting it's a challenge to translate such a powerful thing into lyrics and melody. but the listeners who have followed Blacc over the course of his career know that his facility with language and sound is deep. And if anyone's up for the task, it's him. Raised by Panamanian immigrants in Southern California, Aloe Blacc grew up around the sounds of salsa, merengue, and cumbia. He initially developed his own taste by throwing himself into hip hop before trying out his soulful voice to other ends. Across 5 albums, his sound evolved and grew, finding a pocket that reflects the long and beautiful history of American soul with timeless, descriptive songwriting that speaks to the broad range of human experience, from platonic love to love for humanity, from politics to aspirations. Aloe Blacc isn't defined by genre. Beloved hits like I Need a Dollar, The Man, and Wake Me Up with Avicii may not fall under the same musical umbrella, but they're united by how they make the listener feel. So without further ado, here's Aloe. Aloe Blacc, welcome to the Boom Vision podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Before we begin, Aloe, I'd love to hear your origin story. Where did it all start? What was it like growing up for you that shaped you and who you are today?
Right. Well, I grew up in Southern California in a small suburb called Laguna Hills in the county of Orange. My parents are immigrants from Panama, and they moved to the United States in the mid 70s for a better life, more opportunity. And my father joined the military, the Marine Corps, in order to have an income for his family. And instead of moving around from military base to military base, my mom and dad decided that we should stay in one place. And that's why my mom chose the best school district that she could find nearest to the base that we lived on at the time. And we were basically in a community that nurtured us. We meaning my sister and I, my older sister and I, and then eventually my younger sister, a great schooling and a nice neighborhood to grow up in. From a cultural standpoint, things were really different in my house than in the houses of the friends that I would visit. Of course, being one of only a few Black students in my neighborhood, but also different because my parents were from Panama and there were no other immigrants from that country that I could remember from Central America at all. And I tried to assimilate as best as possible. And I feel like it was a comfortable assimilation. I felt welcomed and have lifelong friends from when I grew up in Laguna Hills. And that, I also discovered my passion for music at a young age, experiencing hip hop music and wanting to rap and write lyrics among other forms of music that my parents were playing. Hip hop is what spoke to me, especially from the breakdance side of things, the b-boying, physical movement. Because as a youngster, you have a lot of energy, you want to get out. And the rest of the kids on the block were dancing, so I thought I'd join in. The music that we danced to was hip hop, and that became the music that I listened to while growing up. And then the music that I decided to make as well.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a singer, songwriter, early on in age, or did that kind of come later on in life?
I never thought of it as a career goal. I always recognized it as a hobby. I thought, well, I'm already making songs. By the time I was in high school, I was recording with DJ Exile, and I felt like this is a really cool hobby. It doesn't necessarily need to expand into a career. And even if it does, it's still going to be something I do on the side. I'm definitely going to have a regular job like my parents do and like my parents want me to have.
Right.
So that was always the mission, was go to college, get a job, and you can, have fun on the weekends with your music. But the responsible thing is to have a traditional career.
Interesting. I can definitely relate to that. And so what happened in your journey that pivoted from a hobby to like, wait, I think there's something here where I need to double down on this path of music?
What's interesting is that in high school, I started recording with DJ Exile, and we put out records and cassette tapes, and eventually we put out CDs. And all through my college years, we were making music and performing on the weekends. This was around the time the internet was available in the mid 90s. to everyone around the world. And so our music was making it around the world through MP3s. And we were communicating with people in multiple different countries to send them music, mailing cassettes, across the ocean to Europe or to Australia. And I recognized that I had a fan base and there was some measure of success, but it wasn't life changing economic success. It was just very humble, niche audience cult following
Hmm.
that I had. And so that to me didn't spell drop everything and just do music. And so went through college, got my degree, and went into corporate America. And it was in corporate America where I started to get a sense of like, oh, I feel way better on the weekend when I'm doing music than I do behind the desk
Hmm.
as a business consultant. And sometimes at the desk as a business consultant, I find myself, wanting to write lyrics rather than do work.
Hmm.
And so there was a point where the company had a reduction of force and I was made redundant. And so I thought, I'll go get another job soon. I'm just going to try music for a little bit. And if nothing materializes, then I'll go back to the workforce or I'll go back to school, get another degree. But month after month, positive things kept happening with music that really kind of pushed me in this path that I never moved toward school or further employment in corporate America.
Hmm.
And eventually I got signed to an indie label. And that was the point where, for me, I recognized, okay, now that I've got a contract from an indie label, a little bit of money to help pay rent for the rest of the year, I'm going to take this music opportunity seriously and really, double down and see if I can build something. Always knowing the safety net was it's really easy to go back to school and I could probably easily get another consulting job.
Hmm. So it sounds like it was because there was no attachment to this element of fear.
There really was no element of fear, no attachment, and to like trying my hardest to make it in the music business. It was
Yeah.
just take it or leave it. I'm already in the music business. I'm just doing operating at a very small level, and
Hmm.
that's good enough for me. That was kind of the attitude. I'm happy with
Yeah.
the fans that I have. I'm happy with my weekend warrior status as an artist, and the kind of accolade that I get from my peers, that's sufficient.
Yeah.
I've got other fish to fry in life, so I feel good with what I'm doing with music. I'll probably go back to school and get a PhD. These are the things I'm thinking,
Yeah.
or I'll stay in corporate America and become a partner in a firm and make a difference that way. But
Hmm.
ultimately, music kept showing up.
Got it. And what's really interesting is that on my show, I iterate that when you're in that flow, whether that flow is in creativity, whether that flow is just, you feel like you're in a zone where just time just goes away. Those are glimpses of just sharing, hey, this is what your soul is meant to be doing, and when you're in that zone, I find things tend to manifest a lot easier. Things tend to attract a lot easier. And so it sounds like, you mentioned earlier before, you were always looking forward to a weekend because when you were in music, the energy and that feeling was much different versus just being in corporate, whether it's in a cubicle or wherever it may be. And so I'm curious, when you did get signed up for that indie label, do you feel there were seeds you planted that bear fruit then? Like, was there any certain inflection points in that 1 year when you did sign for indie where things just kind of escalated from one point to another? Like, what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, the seed was planted, I think, just before I started the corporate job. When I graduated from university, I went on a tour with some hip hop artists in Europe. And at the end of that tour, I began working on recording with one of the artists who was signed to an indie label. And that recording took a couple of years to that seed took a couple of years to germinate. While I was in corporate, the record label was hearing the music and really considering whether or not to sign me. And then, just like with the great timing of the universe, I was laid off and I had just a small gap between then and when the label decided to sign me. And the ironic thing, though, is that it was an unexpected motivation for signing me. They knew me as a rap artist, a hip hop artist. But on the work that I did with one of their artists, I sang one song. Out of 16 songs, I sang one.
Hmm.
And it was that one song that I sang rather than rapped that they signed me for. And they wanted me to be a vocalist for them. And so it was a
Wow.
whole new presentation that I had to bootstrap. I had to figure out what I was going to do as a vocalist because that's what they were signing me for.
Got
And
it.
hadn't had any real experience or practice as a vocalist. I would do a little bit of melodic element in my hip hop, but I was not a singer by any stretch of the imagination. So
Hmm.
I had to experiment a lot and try to develop what it meant to be a singer at this point.
Hmm. Well, now I'm really curious. What song was that?
So I had a album really of rap songs, and one of the beats that I was supposed to write a rap to, I couldn't figure out what to say, and so I decided to sing a cover of Sam Cooke's Change Is Gonna Come.
Hmm.
And literally, the words are true, right? An entire change came, and it also became sort of the model for my career. That was Sam Cooke's one protest song or movement song or activism song about the civil rights movement. And it ultimately foreshadows my career making music for positive social transformation, using my songs to try to be effective in whatever social movement or emotional and psychological phase we are in the world.
Wow. Man, there's so much irony and synchronicity, and the fact that that was a song that sort of pivoted you to, nope, from a rapper to now moving over to a singer with that Sam Cooke song. So, speaking of which, I'm a firm believer that there's energy behind words. There's energy behind the language we use. And so I'm also curious too, how did you come up with that stage name, Aloe Blacc?
Well, when I was younger in high school, I really respected and looked up to artists like Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Black Sheep, and they're all part of this family unit called the Native Tongue family. And Q-Tip is an artist from Tribe Called Quest whose name I always thought meant, as if he's a Q-tip, he's cleaning out your ears and offering you the kind of thing that you need to hear.
Hmm.
So I thought of my style of music as, it's smooth like lotion, but also, soothing to the soul. So I chose Aloe Blacc as my representative moniker, hoping one day I would become part of the Native Tongue family.
Nice. I love that. So here's another question, Aloe, is that, in business, there's often times where, we'll find co-founders to create a company, or there's other times where instead of, combining people's strengths, they'll be solopreneurs. They'll start their, business on by themselves. You mentioned earlier that early on you partnered up with DJ Exile, right? That's kind of how you started your musical career. What was it that branched off to, I think it's time to do your solo career? Was it certain events that happened? Was it culmination, or love to kind of understand what went through the process of
I
that?
was doing a lot of experimentation. I was stretching my boundaries. The internet at the time offered a lot of music for free. So I was downloading a lot of different sounds and experimenting with different styles, learning from different genres of music. And I was continuing to write and record hip hop, but I was also testing out jazz and R&B and rock and dance music. And ultimately, I ended up meeting a really talented MC named Blue, who I introduced to Exile, and they started working together and creating music together. And it was meant to be. Like their combination was historic. They ended up making a classic hip hop album in the time that I was basically absent from working with Exile and focusing on singing, and at the same time being courted by this record label. So it was a confluence of a couple of events, that the fact that I was experimenting, the fact that Blue and Exile were now able to make music together. So I didn't feel a pressure to do hip hop just because Exile and I were a unit. Like he could continue to make beats for a overly qualified MC, and then also the fact that the record label was looking for a vocalist.
So it sounds like what happened is maybe internally you just knew, hey, maybe this is a time to mentally kind of branch off. But then instead of just leaving your partner hanging, you found someone, it came into your life. It's like, wait, you guys need to work together, and sort of like just kind of creating that space for that to nurture, which then in and of itself created the space for you to be able to explore your own solo kind of creativity. It's kind
It
of
really
what I
did.
gather.
It really did. I didn't feel any pressure at that point to be there for Exile as an MC and to continue working because, at that point in time, I had already had my experience at university, experience in corporate America, and his livelihood was still very much and is still very much music, and whatever we create, we do concerts, and that's what's going to pay his rent.
Mm,
So offering him an opportunity to continue to do that by introducing him to Blue really was sort of my way of relieving myself of the pressure of having to continue being in that partnership from a
mm.
financial standpoint. But I never processed it that way. But now that I look back at it, it's definitely, I can see how that is an interpretation and probably one that really did manifest at the time.
Yeah. Alan, in terms of inspiration and influence in your life, like where do you draw your inspiration from when you create your music? I mean, it sounds like it's evolved over the years, but
Mm.
you know, is there a particular band you mentioned about Tribe Called Quest? Was there a band or a singer or even a specific song that like had the biggest influence in your life? And why? And why was that?
Well, there was a singer that had the biggest influence in my life and made me want to really focus on singing and in particular take on the role of a songwriter, not just a rapper and writing rap songs. And that was Cat Stevens. I saw a commercial, an infomercial or something where they were selling Cat Stevens' greatest hits. And there was a video of him singing and performing. And I just saw the sincerity in his face and I heard the compassion in his voice. And I wanted to be able to do what he was doing and make people feel the way he was making me feel. And I didn't feel that hip hop was sufficient at the time. I didn't feel that what I was doing as an MC was coming anywhere close to what he
Hmm.
was doing. So I wanted to explore that. And so I would say that was the catalyst, like seeing that and then diving into wanting to write folk songs, wanting to learn guitar, wanting to tell stories that could grab people's hearts. And I had yet to do that in a real way with hip hop. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to learn and stretch my skill set and maybe I can bring it back, to hip hop someday.
Nice. And so, in terms of priorities in life, Aloe, I mean, being a family oriented, how has being a family man transformed your career and how you prioritize and just balance your career and family versus, before versus it now?
Yeah. Before I even got married or started dating Maya, my hours were completely nonsensical. I would go out to, let's say on a Thursday or Friday night or on the weekend to a club. Actually, in LA, there was something happening every night at that time. So go out to a club and close at 2 o'clock, get home, be inspired by the music I heard at the club, and start producing and writing songs, making music with headphones on, so I didn't wake up my roommates until maybe 5 in the morning. Go to sleep at 5 in the morning, wake up at maybe noon, and start the day making music again and finishing up whatever I started in the wee hours of the night. When I started dating Maya and we were living together, my hours changed dramatically. And, I wanted to stay up late and work on music, but Maya wanted to be not disturbed by the music and also wanted to have a unified kind of sleeping and waking habit. Otherwise, we'd be on totally different time schedules, right?
Mhm.
So and that's not conducive for a relationship. So I started to manage my time based on her hours. And then when it came time to tour, and we were going on tour together, we were going all over the world. And we didn't have any responsibilities back home. So there was nothing to worry about. There were no kids, no pets. Um, and so we were traveling off of when I had released the Good Things album, and I Need a Dollar became a hit. And she was opening all of the concerts that I was doing all throughout Europe. It was a beautiful time. And when we came back home at the end of all of that touring from 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, we finally settled down, and that's when we had our first child. So that was the moment where a lot of the touring stopped,
Hmm.
and I ended up doing one final kind of US tour in 2014 when my first child was about 11 months old. And there was a day when we were on tour together. So the family was traveling with me, and we've stopped at my wife's uncle's house, and I had to drive a couple more hours to do a show. So they just stayed at uncle's house. I figured I'll just come back, in the morning or after the show. And right before I got on stage, I get a text message with a video showing my daughter taking her first steps. And
Hmm.
so for all of the attempts to be there for every moment and even have them on the road with me, I still missed out. And it showed me like I don't want to miss out on too many moments. I'm going
Hmm.
to organize my life in a way that's going to prioritize family, allow me to be home more, and not be on the road for weeks at a time. So we ended up coming up with a kind of a system where 1 week is okay, 2 weeks at the most, but definitely no more than 2 weeks away at a time. And really, nowadays, it's just a few days that I try to be away at a time so I can be home more.
And has that shifted in terms of the type of projects you want to get into, because of whether it's going to be any, intensive traveling or not? Like, does that impact your
Yeah.
also decision making as well? I can imagine.
Yeah, it impacts decision making on the types of projects I want to get into. I'm really considering and working on right now trying to get into something that relates to music and television.
Hmm.
A lot of shows are right in the neck of the woods, and I could easily still be engaging music, but just working down the road during the day and being home for the family in the evening. And that kind of thing sounds really cool. But I've organized right now my life around kind of how the family operates. In the morning I drop the kids off at school. Sometimes my wife is dropping the kids off at school as well, but just after that, then I start my day with music, doing songwriting sessions, and then I'm usually done with the songwriting sessions by the time we have to pick up the kids from school. So just being conscious of the family dynamic is really important.
Yeah. I always find your music to be very soulful with intention, and from that perspective of just like being able to just follow your heart and be able to strengthen that intuition, in business and or even as a professional in a career, there's times where there might be a decision where your left brain logic is deciding you should be going one path or making one decision versus your heart might be pointing you completely in an opposite direction. Have you ever experienced that in your career where maybe logic was saying to do one thing, but your heart was telling you, your gut feeling was like, I should be doing something else? And did you follow that or not? Or, what examples kind of come up?
I think it happens all the time, especially with music. Logic tells me one thing and my heart tells me another thing, and sometimes neither of them win.
Mm.
um, uh, Sometimes what wins is the anomalous request that is someone else's dream, and I just concede, which is what I do when there are requests for me to sing on other people's projects, and I do that quite often, which then obviously takes time for me focusing on my own projects. There are some things that I really, really know I want to do that my heart is telling me this is going to make me extremely happy.
Mm.
There's a business side of me that's like, but there is no return on investment other than happiness. There's no
Mm.
fiscal return on investment. And so trying to figure out, but I hear a lot of anecdotes, do what you love and the money will come, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I believe that. I believe in that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. It's just a matter of exercising the belief,
Uh,
because I can see where there's a return on investment from other activities really easily. And this other one, although there may be one down the line, it's not immediate. So I'm kind of going for the immediate. My brain is telling me go for the immediate income rather than the long term, long tail
Yeah.
building.
Man, I think we could probably dive into that topic alone pretty deep just because, I used to come from a world of ROIs, right? Investment world. And what I found in my second chapter of my career is that money is just energy. And if you can really, in a conscious level, but also being selective, if you can focus on what you just mentioned, like ROH, return on happiness,
Mm.
right? If you can really draw from that well and that makes you full, what I found, and I don't know if there's science points to this or not, but what I just found just anecdotally for me is that from that well of happiness, the return on investment financially might not be apparent, but what ends up happening as a byproduct is that you then attract this energy and other new people or new projects that come in. And then it isn't until like 2 or 3 degrees later where, oh my God, I would have had that door would not have opened if I didn't just focus on the happiness. And so that's just a long way to just saying, I would definitely encourage, yeah, if you have something that would definitely make you feel happy, I love, like, is there a project you can share, like what that entails? Because it sounds,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what I would really love to do is show people the process of creativity that I engage when I'm coming up with a song. And so I'm actually right now in the process of working with a production company to do a TV show that showcases that, but it's really fundamentally different from the thing that I know, that this other thing that I really want to do. So when I go
Mm.
to a concert, I'm performing songs that people already know. And so in some cases, people don't know, but I'm just working the crowd to make them like the song. What I'd love to do is share in a set for 45 minutes, an hour and a half, the creative process from little ideas that I've saved in my voice memos and voice notes, and lyrics that I've saved that don't exist yet as full songs. They are
Mm.
just the nucleus of the beginning, granular pieces of an idea that ultimately I would share with my musicians on stage and create something extemporaneously in front of an audience. And to
Mm.
me, it is a kind of a free jazz experiment. It doesn't sound like free jazz because some of the songs are in my head. They're pop songs, they're rock songs, they're R&B songs, but the experimentation part of it, the free association part of it, all of that is what I'd love to be doing on stage. And I've tested it out once, and I had the time of my life. I've not tested it out in front of people. I did it in private, but I had the
Mm.
time of my life. And I know that this is what I'd really like to be doing. I just don't see the possibility of people buying a ticket to go hear music that they don't know what it's going to be.
Mm.
And you'd have to prove it a few times before people are like, oh, you got to go see this thing that Aloe does because it's different every time and
Yeah.
it's awesome. But I don't know if it's going to be awesome to other people. I know it's awesome to me,
Yeah.
and I might be, kind of the only cheerleader for this.
Well, what came to me as you're sharing that, Aloe, is that it almost seems like a mix between a masterclass live session of how does you get from an ideating idea, creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and actually nourish it where it starts building some form, right? And the correlation I see of what you just said in terms of the process versus, let's say, in the business world, it's like, in venture capital, you have these incubators. The idea is on paper. It's not even a business yet. But do you surround itself with the right resources, with the right advisors to help nurture it so there is form, and then proving out the MVP? It's just, there's a lot of correlations to what that process looks like when you're building a business versus what you're doing really in the form of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably a different conversation, but I love it. I think definitely something there because when you think about masterclass, it's all pre-recorded videos. Like that format, it's well when you're in by yourself. But the thing about creativity is, people feed off of each other's energy when it's live.
Mm-hmm.
That's something it's really hard to just bottle up and just saying, here's a video series of it. You just have to experience it live. right? You just got to be able to articulate, I think, in that
Yeah.
way. I think there's something there. It just matter how do you package it from it.
Yeah.
But
Oh, and that's the part, that is daunting for me because I've
mm,
already got a thing that works.
yeah.
And why reinvent the wheel? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm,
Um, there's definitely going to be more experimentation, I think, in private until I can kind of prove to myself that it's worthy of bringing to an audience.
yeah. Awesome. Ella, you mentioned before in previous interviews of this acronym AIM,
Hmm.
AIM. Love for you to explain what does that mean to you? How did that came about?
Well, it means for me, so AIM is an acronym that stands for affirmation, inspiration, motivation. And I'm constantly asked what genre of music it is that I make. And because I've made music in multiple different genres and have had hits in multiple different genres, I feel like it's not so much about genre when it comes
Mm,
to what I do. It's more about theme. And the songs that have hit for me are the songs that speak to affirming your goals, that speak to either being inspired or inspiring others, and songs that speak to motivation, self motivating or motivating others. And I feel like it makes it easier for me to communicate to people when I explain that I am a lyricist who focuses on theme more than genre, because I can take any one of my songs and record it in any other genre of music, and it will still be the same song because the intention is whole and intact.
mm. I love that. I actually use a similar letters acronym, but in a different way. So what I say on my show is I am. So it's the same letters,
Hmm.
IAM. And what I share with my audience is that when you make that declaration out loud, people are feeling stuck or they're feeling low in energy. But if you're able just to say out loud, I am confident, I am worthy, I am love, the mere act of saying I stands for intentions, A stands for actions, M stands for manifestation. What you put your intentions to, what you back it up with your actions, and by saying it, you're making that declaration, you manifest. And so there's so much power to the words when you can say it with such conviction and with
Hmm.
such emotion, you know? And so when I saw AIM, I was like, wow, same same letter, just a little reordering, but it seems like the intentionality is there because
Yeah.
I love the fact that it's not, you don't have to pigeon yourself whole in a specific genre, but when you think of it thematically, then you get to go across all different spectrums without having those set boundaries, right?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes the set boundaries are very limiting in terms of where people will accept your work.
Yeah.
And so because I focus on these themes, I feel like the work then is available to multiple genres, and it allows me to operate within those, disparate genres as well.
So Al, do you feel you have a good foundation of mind, body, and soul? Or another way of asking it is like, how do you create that strong rhythm and foundation for yourself?
Wow. Um, I don't know if it's a strong foundation. I think I'm in a comfort zone, and I feel like I'm whole, you know? And how do I do that for myself? I think it's a matter of recognizing who I want around me, what energy I'm willing to accept around me, when I should or should not push to do something, when it's time to rest. I feel like I have a good sense of what it is that I am capable of, and what I'm willing to deal with in terms
Mm,
of people's energy, and I'm in a good balance all the time. And whenever I feel an imbalance, I know that either I need to change something about that imbalance, or I am purposefully in a position where I'm learning and moving into a new realm. When I was on a major recording label, there was a time where I felt a huge imbalance and I knew I needed to leave the label.
mm,
And so it was a very stressful time. And I don't ever really feel or process or acknowledge stress. So in that moment when I was actually feeling it and processing it, I knew there was something very wrong. And in order to get to the other side of that, I had to do something extremely risky, or at least what felt like a risk, which was to leave the recording contract and go out on my own.
Mm.
But I didn't feel good where I was. So the only way to feel better, in my opinion at the time, was to make that transformation. And it worked, and so now I'm in a peaceful place. And now I'm in a place where there is some tension and a little bit of anxiety around a new venture that I'm engaging, but that's because I'm learning, and it's a different kind of stress. It's not a bad stress. It's like a really positive stress. It's exciting, and I'm managing that in the best way that I can, and using the sort of anxiety and stress to propel me forward to learn more and to be as effective in this new venture.
Yeah. Man, I can relate to that because just hearing your story about when you were in that major label, but that relationship, it sounded like just didn't serve you going forward, right?
Right.
And having to make that pivot, you mentioned about transformations, what helped you, it sounds like you did the inner work first before you're able to actually translate that to the outer work, right? In terms of what's going on with you internally. And that leads to my next question, which is like, what advice would you be able to share with our audience where if they're having a tough time with the current default path that they're on, and there's something about wanting to express it, whether that's their creativity or something where their heart wants to lead to a different path. You mentioned about transformation. What advice would you be able to share to audience to help them bridge that gap of, rather than staying on a default path, what can they do to help them along the way in terms of that transformation that similar to what you had to go through?
This is take small calculated steps. Risk what you know you can risk in making that transformation. It doesn't have to happen overnight in one movement. For me, in particular with leaving the record label, it was a series of conversations, a lot of investigation, a lot of calculation, and ultimately making the right calculated steps that were small, like writing a letter here, having a conversation here, and understanding where all of the vested interests around me were positioned, so I knew what the best way to exact my desires was to be executed. I remember having the privilege of talking to Richard Branson about how he was successful in creating multiple companies with the same brand, and in particular his airline. And he said that he knew there was a problem that he wanted to fix, and he knew how much money he could risk, and he only spent that much. And when he proved his case, then he was able to risk a little bit more to build, and at each successive step took only the necessary risk for intended reward.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who's feeling like they want to make a huge transformation, it's okay to take bite sizes and incremental steps.
Got it. The only way isn't just jumping out of the plane with, and then building your parachute on the way down. That process doesn't work for everyone. But what I'm hearing from you, Aloe, is that making those incremental changes can compound in a very beautiful way if you're doing it in a very, like in your words, calculated way in terms of what you're able to stomach, right? In terms
Yeah,
of a
and
risk.
learning from others as well. Like, there's something to be said for being able to, learn vicariously and experience vicariously. Watching how others operate and what they did in their transformation, or what they do in their transformed position that you want to eventually be in. And you get to see and live in an imaginative way their shoes, can help prepare you. It's projection into the future. I'm starting to court a lot of folks in the finance industry and getting to understand what venture capital is. And these are things that are foreign to me because it never was part of my upbringing. My parents are not in the banking world, in the finance world, but these are things that I want to learn, It's a language that I want to have facility with. This is information that I want my kids to have now while they're very young, so that when they grow older and they get into college or maybe beyond college, they are already completely in the know about how systems of money work. And I find it really fascinating. So I'm sort of like, just kind of having conversations with people here and there and talking to all levels of investment world so that I can be a little bit smarter. And
Hmm.
who knows? I don't necessarily intend to become an investment banker, but I want to be able to know what they do and how
Right.
they operate. I don't intend to become a venture capitalist, but I want to know what they do and how they operate.
Right. Got it. Well, to the extent that I can help you on that journey, happy to be a resource for you on that for sure. So, one question I always ask my guests is that if the DeLorean was real in the sense that you can travel back in time,
Mm.
what would be one thing you would tell yourself if you can travel back 10 years ago that you would share with your younger self?
So 10 years, 2012. Wow. I would tell my younger self there are some very specific things like find the right mentor now
Hmm.
who can guide you through this time, because this is right when I was signing with a major label, so that I could get the right deal and have the right kind of leadership and network way more, because amazing things are going to happen. You're going to have access to a lot of people and a lot of worlds, and if you make good relationships, they'll last for quite a long time and you'll be able to affect more change.
We started before about intentions for today, and you mentioned about positive transformation. What does that mean for you if, let's say, looking 10 years from now,
Mhm.
what sort of positive transformation are you looking to help instill and activate?
10 years from now, so
Yeah.
if I were to say, if I were to be able to make a positive transformation on, let's say, a high school individual, maybe somebody who's, let's say you've graduated age 18. So if somebody's 8 right now, let's say there's a third grader right now that I can have an impact on their life, or maybe a cohort of third graders, by giving them opportunities to learn computer coding, opportunities to understand business and finance and financial literacy, opportunities to travel to other countries or other states even, and following and nurturing that cohort until they're 18 when they graduate from high school,
Mm.
that they would be so equipped for entrepreneurial endeavors, for university, or for matriculating straight into a corporate gig. That's the kind of impact I want to be able to make, for especially in underrepresented areas where students who don't make it into entrepreneurial endeavors or into university or college or into corporate America.
Yeah.
Now, that's the kind of positive transformation I want to make, because then with that, they symbolize to younger students coming behind them possibility, where
Right.
where education can lead them,
Yeah.
and it could transform a community.
Yeah. What I got from that, Aloe, is that it's if you teach them how to fish, not just give them the fishing rod, but really just teach them how and the
Mm,
techniques and learning how to do that, then that carries them on for life. Because then,
absolutely.
right, and that's when that positive transformation is lasting and sustainable.
Sustainable transformation is what I'm really about.
Yeah.
It's figuring out how to develop a system that begets itself, so that
Right.
once you've initiated the first series of learning, then you have this whole cohort that is now successful and can do what I've done for them for multiple other youth.
Yeah. So, Aloe, usually I ask my guests where can listeners find you, but I'm pretty sure people will be able to find you pretty easily. But the different question would be that, is there any upcoming projects or passions you have that you want to be able to share that our audience can know more about?
So my latest album really is an album that I sincerely wanted to dive into this concept of being a parent, being a father, being a family man. And I am focused on using my skill set to continue to tell my story in real time, where I'm at in my life, which I don't see happening for a lot of artists as they get older. They sometimes try to continue to sing as though they were younger, but that's because there's a bias in the industry for younger stories, because consumption is quite often from younger audience members. So what I would encourage people to engage with in terms of projects that I'm working on is this latest album called All Love Everything, and to find their story in the songs that I'm sharing.
Mm. Well, with that note, Aloe, I'll say, one of the things I share with my audience is to pick a song that's represents and symbolizes sort of like their anthem for the year, right? Every year we have different themes in terms of what we want to work on. And what I share is that there's such great energy behind songs, especially ones that you resonate with. Mm-hmm. And my anthem this year actually happens to be one of your songs, which is My Way, because there's something about that where, it's, you just want to be able to do things your way. And because it's time to just follow your heart and just do what makes you feel at bliss, into that flow. So I definitely appreciate you. I appreciate the music you put out. I definitely resonate with AIM in that when it's affirmation, when it's inspiration, when it's motivation, your music definitely translates that. And thank you for doing that. And as I said, if I can be of any resource to you, I'm happy to do so.
Great. Thank you so much.
Man, I really hope you all enjoyed today's interview with Aloe as much as I did. There's a few main takeaways I got from today's interview. The first takeaway is when you let go of the attachment to fear, it gives you the space and mental freedom for your passion to come into your life. Early in his career, Aloe did not have any attachment to fear. It wasn't that he was trying his hardest to make it in the music industry. His mindset was take it or leave it. He was already in the music industry. He was just operating at a level that he was satisfied with as a weekend warrior and his overseas fan base. It's because he removed the element of fear. That freed up the space for his passion of music to breathe and grow, allowing the universe to have music keep showing up in his life. The second takeaway is ROH versus ROI. Return on happiness versus return on investment. There's often times that your conscious mind will be evaluating your options at hand from an ROI level. However, when you know that there are things that have a high ROH, return on happiness, in your life, please do not ignore it. If you can give yourself the permission to prioritize doing things that give you absolute bliss, absolute happiness, make it a point to create those moments for yourself. There's a quote I want to share. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. This quote was by Mahatma Gandhi. The third and final takeaway is this. For anyone looking to make a huge transformation, it's okay to take bite sizes and incremental steps. If you feel you're stuck on a current default path that you're having a tough time in, or perhaps it's bringing you no joy, you don't necessarily have to make it a hard pivot overnight. Evaluate the situation and take incremental and calculated steps that can accumulate to huge transformation. The key is to take consistent action to change your situation and not feel bounded by the situation at hand. If you enjoyed today's interview, please share this episode with your family, friends, or loved ones that you feel can benefit. Hit that subscribe button for this Boom Vision podcast if you haven't already done so that we can thrive together by building success on a rock-solid foundation of our mind, body, and soul. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in the light. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.